you can be 5'10", still, maybe lead your team, rebounding, right? So, but the idea was everybody has different strengths.
Of how this philosophy is translated into a project here in Indianapolis, and how do you ensure your designs actively engage and revitalize the communities where they're built?
So there's no such thing as a neutral space. Space either affects us in a good way or a bad way.
And it's not just a roof over their head, but it's better quality of space, better natural light, more identity and dignity in where they're living. I think we're still employing a lot of the same tactics. We're just using them in a little bit different way, but it all has to do with human scale.
We were challenged, came up with a new direction or a new design, and because of that process, the project's better.
Welcome to the On Center podcast, where we explore the intersection of architecture, construction, and the people who bring the built world to life. In this episode, we're joined by the team behind 110 Studio, a small but mighty architecture firm based right here in Indianapolis, recently named one of Forbes' top 200 American residential architects and the recipient of 2 citation awards at last year's AIA Indiana Design Awards. 110 Studio has made it clear thoughtful design doesn't require a massive firm, just a bold vision, sharp collaboration, and a relentless attention to the details that matter. Founded in 2010 by Clete Kunce and now co-led by architects Daniel Toner and Andrew Fries, the studio has built a reputation for connecting neighborhoods, embracing constraints as creative opportunities, and delivering work that's as grounded as it is inspiring. Today, we're pulling back the curtain to talk about how we got here, how they work, and what's next. From treetop outposts and breweries to civic spaces and custom homes, this is a team that's proving that every project can punch above its weight, and it's designed on center. How you guys doing?
That was great.
Good. Yes, yeah. You make it sound pretty good.
Yeah, it does sound pretty good. Are we done?
Yeah.
We usually have to do that ourselves. That's kind of nice. Talk about us for a second.
I got to make you guys feel good.
Yeah.
You are our personal friends after all.
Yeah.
All right. This first question is about the founding vision. You reorganized your earlier practice to form 110 Studio in 2010, envisioning a nimble, design-led firm. What was the driving vision behind founding 110, and how does that vision hold up now after a decade of projects and growth? And how did your past experiences, from working in Chicago to running a previous studio, shape the culture and philosophy that you've established here?
Wow, that was a lot. Okay. Vision. Let's start with vision.
Sure.
Right?
How does it hold up after a decade of projects and growth?
I think it holds up well. I mean, it was based on a lot of experience in Chicago. I worked for mostly small firms there, which I enjoyed, sort of because I still think architecture is about people more than buildings. So when I got here, I did all the usual things, worked for all the big firms that we can mention everyone's worked for, I think, in Indianapolis. Maybe there's one I didn't work for. But in this profession, right, as you get success, you keep kind of moving up the ladder. And for me, I was doing like less architecture, managing projects and budgets and time and sitting in long meetings, and it was a little frustrating. So I started in 99. I wanted to make it design focused. I always wanted to be small. I actually did a business plan back in 1999. Do people still do that? I'm assuming they do.
Yeah, probably should.
You probably should. But I played a lot of basketball as a kid, so I kind of formed it around a basketball team, right? Because in basketball, you're not playing offense or defense. You're kind of doing all of it. You can be 5'10", still, maybe lead your team, you're rebounding, right? So, but the idea was everybody has different strengths and to play on those strengths. So that was always the vision, was to have a team, small, nimble, like a basketball team pretty much, right? So we're all contributing to the cause in our own way, but we're not getting in the huddle and like yelling at each other for our weaknesses, right? We're like, no, how do I pump you up? How do I make you better? How do you make me better? How do we do that and win, right? That was, in a nutshell, kind of the vision, kind of the simple,
Has that changed at all in the past 10, 15 years?
No, not really. Because I think we still like to sort of have that personal touch on every project we have, right? So it's not like we have a business development person that comes in, sells a project, and then, you never see them again, and then we show up in the room. And so, to us, we're all kind of involved. That's why we have the studio culture. We're all involved in every project from start to finish. And that's what I think kind of trips our trigger and gets us up in the morning, right? It's not like, oh, God, I need to work and do whatever window details, right, for 3 weeks. So we're all kind of bobbing and weaving, wearing different hats, kind of doing our thing and going to our strengths, right? Because I don't think we should ever try to like pick on anybody's weaknesses. And yeah, it's like going back to the whole, right? It's not helping anybody. And if I'm not really good at something, no matter what you do, I'm probably not going to get that much better at it. You know, I could try to get better at it, but if I have no incentive to get better at it, I don't. But if Daniel can do something or Andrew can do something, then I don't have to try to bolster that weakness. I think that's the key to kind of success in the team. And, you know, because we have to be sort of team oriented based on our size. But even in all those large firms I worked at, there were only maybe 3 or 4 architects on a team, right? Doing a $50 million hospital addition or something, right? It was still just 3 architects and some engineers. And, you know, so we just go about it differently. You know, I like your small but mighty, because I do think we're small and mighty. Yeah, that's the way we kind of did it. So, and it was always design focused from the very beginning. Like I said, I kind of worked up and I just wanted to come back and design and, you know, sketch in coffee shops and do those kinds of things, kind of get back to architecture.
I'm going to touch on one thing you said. You said something about you know, a BD person going out, selling the job, and then you never hear from them again. In the projects that I've worked on you with, it seems that you guys do a really good job of maintaining relationships with your clients. Is that an active part of your company culture, or is that just, I guess, a derivative thereof?
No, I think it's a pretty active part. We usually joke that, you know, if any business guy ever came in and analyzed our business, they'd probably just, you know, wipe us out of the room, right? Because we just focus on relationships because we think that's what sort of makes the world go round, right? So it's all about kind of maintaining that relationship. And most of the time at the end of our projects, our clients become our friends. We hang out with them. Used to invite them to my Christmas party every year until, you know, COVID hit, and then kind of went by the wayside. But that's the goal, is to be friends at the end of the day, right? Which is kind of hard sometimes, especially like a custom residence, right? Because there could be a lot of things that could happen there. Sure. And most people have bad experiences with builders, and, you know, so we're trying to sort of follow all those waters too, right? And still maintain a really great relationship. But everything we do is relationship based, good, bad, or indifferent. We've never really marketed per se. It's all been pretty much word of mouth, and people find us on the internet or the, you know, social media or wherever they happen to be searching about. So we feel pretty lucky in that way, and that it's always just come to us. It never really felt like we had to get out there and boom, boom, boom. Maybe we should.
That worked out so far.
Yeah.
I think there's also a big incentive for us to stay involved through the duration of the project pretty heavily. It's not just do some drawings and turn them over to a builder and walk away. You know, I think for us to be a representative for the owners through the course of the build is really important. And, you know, we as a team with the clients have come up with this, what we think is a pretty cool design, and we want to see it built that way. So we stay heavily involved through construction to be the advocate for the owners and to ensure that, you know, what we all came up with as a collective before we got kicked off on the build is what gets brought to life.
Yeah. All those details are important.
Absolutely.
We have to make sure they get implemented, which is hard these days.
I'm going to touch on your mission statement for a sec. 110 Studios' mission statement specifically talks about transforming the Midwest by reconnecting neighborhoods through thoughtful design. Can you share an example of how this philosophy is translated into a project here in Indianapolis, and how do you ensure your designs actively engage and revitalize the communities where they're built?
Ooh, yeah, that's a good one. Well, I think if you sort of look at all our projects, whether that's single family, multifamily, community-based, I think they're all got a little bit of sort of a human housing element involved. I'd say maybe I got a couple that come to mind for the community, I guess. One is Lutheran Child and Family Services over on the east side that we did years ago. But it won a monumental award, won several monumental awards, neighborhood award, community award, design award. But I think what we bring to the table is we look at projects in kind of a completely different way, and we look at them in a more kind of human, almost more romantic way, I think, in that it's about the experience that we feel the inhabitants are going to have, or the occupants. So Lutheran Child and Family Services, as an example, was basically a jail for children in the first phase that we weren't involved in. But, it was concrete block walls, glass block windows, and all those kids wanted to do was escape, right? Because it was a terrible environment. So you can't expect anybody to get better in that. So we changed that whole kind of mindset. We did really tall, clear story windows in the rooms that they could still see sunlight, treetops, full height glass in a corridor or on the courtyard, which we got a little pushback, right? That the kids were going to break glass. But the thing is, if you control glass, control views, it's really a beautiful thing, right? Because we're always trying to do well-being sort of design techniques, right? To help the human spirit and your health and all that. So that was kind of a big one that the community kind of got around and was a little different and was still pretty successful. So it's still a jail for kids, sure, but it's just thought about in a different way. It still uses the same materials. We still have concrete block. We still have, concrete floors. We still have durable materials because of that population. But again, they're in a community, right? They're in the neighborhood. They're across the street from community east, or I don't know if that's what it's still called, but from the hospital. And so it's a pretty tight-knit little neighborhood there, but everyone embraced that, right? I think before we came, it was more jail-like. It had a barbed wire fence around the perimeter. We took the building and made the building the perimeter, so we didn't have to do barbed wire fence and make it look like it was jail. Right? So now it just fits into the neighborhood context and with all the single-family homes, and we're still controlling kids and behavior, but just in a different way. So,
have you got any feedback how that's affected the children's behavior or rehabilitation?
Yeah, all the kids kind of, change their behavior from where they are. A lot of them are homeless. A lot of them come from, it was a court-appointed sort of situation, right, where courts would appoint them to go there as opposed to jail or rehab or, whatever. So, but yeah, I'm still in touch with the director every now and then, and it's been really a great experience for them as well, because they didn't really believe us at first. Because I said, well, hey, call me whenever they break that full height glass on the courtyard. I never got a phone call. So, and he tells me every time, he's like, no one's ever broken that glass. And I'm like, I know, if you give somebody nice, I think, give it some respect and give them something nice, they'll respect it. So, sure. Plus, they know they're being watched by the staff across the court, which is also full height glass. So if you can see and be seen, your behavior changes. Absolutely. I think that's what really happened there. Where if you're in an 8x8 concrete cell, they're taking the waistbands off their underwear and shooting rocks at the windows and doing anything they could to get out, barricading the doors. None of that happens now. So.
Yeah, I was at a conference recently listening to an architect named Tim Farrow give a presentation, and he had kind of recently completed a PhD study on neuroscience and architecture and sort of the built environment. And a couple sort of notable takeaways was, as humans, we spend more time indoors than whales spend underwater, which is kind of a mind-boggling stat.
Yeah, a little bit.
And then also he sort of had this statement that really stuck with me, that there's no neutral space. So there's no such thing as a neutral space. Space either affects us in a good way or a bad way. So I think as architects, we have a responsibility to design spaces that as humans we're spending so much time in in a way that benefits our health and impacts us in a positive way. So as much as we can do to do that, bring the outdoor environment in, and how do we sort of design spaces that are comfortable to be in? That's a really important task that we have as designers.
Do either of you have any projects that popped into your head when I asked this question?
I think one of our recent ones, especially Compass Out Washington, was a permanent supported housing project that very specifically targets people that have recently suffered homelessness. And that was one that, again, it was a little bit like Luther Family Services, that there were some different things that needed to happen from our perspective of like housing and how we design spaces and how we can give certain members of our community dignity, so that and it's not just a roof over their head, but it's better quality of space, better natural light, more identity and dignity in where they're living. I think that helps members of our community get back into the community and not just become sort of a sideline participant. That was a big one for us, because it was a little bit about the architecture of the whole site and how the site engages Washington Street, but also very specifically how an individual will feel in that space, how you give them some covered outdoor space to enjoy, again, natural light and their outdoor activities. That was one specifically for me.
Yeah, not just providing sort of a minimal level of space, doing something that's, better than the bare minimum, really generous windows, really generous kind of living space, and doing that while sort of being aware that you can't over-design something so much that it no longer becomes a project. So, how do we do something that feels good to be in, but also meets a budget? And how do we continue to fight for those design moves and those spaces throughout the process, through not just in design, but in bidding and sort of through construction as well? How do we sort of continue to be, again, that advocate for the clients, the stakeholders throughout the course of the project? I thought of another sort of set of projects or subset of projects that we have when you ask the question. We've done a decent amount of work in historic neighborhoods in Indy, and our firm leans contemporary, if you want to put it that way. And working in historic neighborhoods as a contemporary designer is always an interesting challenge, because we always say we're not trying to replicate the look of a project in these historic neighborhoods. If it looks historic and you build it now, then you're probably not doing it right, at least the way we think about it. Those houses were designed that way because of the technologies and the styles of the day. So something that we build today should look of its time, but also feel rooted in place. So drawing from the context of the neighborhood to make a house, even if it stylistically is very different, feels like it belongs there. That's something that I think we've achieved in a few of our single-family residences and some historic neighborhoods in Indy.
And it's things that we think do historic neighborhood architecture well. We kind of do in all of our projects. It's contextual, whether it's next to a bunch of historic homes or whether it's out in a wooded area. It's all of our architecture is very contextual, and I think that goes a little bit back to kind of the connecting communities. As community isn't just the people that are there, but it's also your visual surroundings and things like that too. So our projects tend to stick out a little bit from their style and architecture with their surrounding architecture, but they feel right in their place, again, because it's all about context and scale, and we're drawing datum lines to things directly in context to them, whether it's the front porch or the eave lines or other historic cues that we're creating architecture that might stand out, but it still feels right in its place.
Yeah.
Those are all beautiful answers. I'm glad I asked that question. You often say that good design is good business. How does that philosophy play out in practice in an industry where budgets and timelines can pressure creativity? And how do you convince clients that investing in thoughtful quality design will benefit their business or community in the long run?
So that's the big trick.
The hardest job we have, I think.
Right.
Yeah, which has to happen on almost every project.
Yes.
Yeah. How do you How do you convey that value?
It's client education, you know. And a lot of times we're, you know, trying to live within budgets that, to be honest, most of the time are unrealistic, right? They're set by somebody else, whoever that is. It's not really that savvy in the design construction industry, right?
Well, and things have changed a lot in the past few years. So it's, you know, it's hard to sort of get historic numbers. And also a lot of our clients, this may be the only time they ever work with an architect. So how do we come alongside them and guide them through the process?
Right. Well, I think maybe Compass is a good example that you just mentioned on the support housing. So, you know, under a budget, low income supportive housing, right? So there's a certain expectation there of what their budget should be, but we still feel no matter the budget, it should be good architecture. So it was a challenge for us and challenge to convince them, but we did some design moves that helped them get there, that we convinced them that would, you know, be cost effective. Because if they weren't cost effective, if they're not cost effective, the client really has a hard time just saying, oh, well, if it's going to be really cool architecture, yeah, let's just do that. Because they just equate that as more money, right? Sure. So at Compass, there were 36 units. So we decided to make every unit the same. Every unit can be converted from the most stringent accessibility-wise to the most independent ability-wise based on. So we just designed, like, for example, the bathroom is the most handicap accessible that you can make it. But yeah, we made it cool so that when you go in there, you don't really think it is. So we have blocking in the walls for future grab bars. All the clearances meet. The vanities are, you know, wall hung so you can roll underneath them. We didn't do individual balconies because we think they're really expensive and don't make a lot of sense, especially when they're like 8 inches deep, right? So instead, we just made large expanses of glass, you know, so we still had the views. You could still get decent breezes, because I think that's the only reason people do these strange little balconies. Instead, we created community rooftop decks. We created a porch in the back underneath the residential wing. So we came up with these kind of strategies. So, you know, like every kitchen's the same, which the facilities people loved as well, right? Sure. They go into it.
They know what to expect.
Right. But we also looked at it as not just be apartments, because we think that's a big mistake, especially in low income and kind of supportive housing, right? Is people just do an apartment building, they call it whatever they want to call it, and expect it to succeed. So I think the minimum square footage per the tax credit people was 505 square feet, something like that. So each unit is 515. So they're really efficient. So we made them as efficient as we could, made them all the same, you know, to get some economy of scale and get some strategy there. So, yeah, so instead of making the bedroom 14 by 12, which these homeless guys wouldn't sleep in anyway, they would sleep on the floor or out on the couch, or because it was uncomfortable, right? It's like a typical bedroom, which I'm sure looks good on most people's plans, but we took that square footage and did it in like 8 by 8 or something. We made it more sleeping berth-like, right? Like you can get a bed and a dresser and a nightstand, but it's not this huge bedroom that's completely uncomfortable from transitioning from the street to being in it doesn't have a lot of usable space. I mean, most bedrooms, you sleep in there, but other than that, right, weighting the space towards sort of the kitchen and the living space afforded these really generous spaces, while maintaining sort of a tight footprint.
Yeah, extremely efficient.
It was the economy of scale. So then that convinced the client, right? That all this makes sense, right? Makes a lot of sense to us. So sure. Yeah. But we have to sort of sell those sorts of ideas all the time, right? Just like, I'm trying to think of another example. We did a dental office, and we had like full high class down the corridor. And the contractor was trying to tell us it'd be cheaper if we just did like punched, you know, like double hung windows or something down the. So then we start pointing out between the owner and the contractor that, well, the storefront glass, we have one contractor, goes floor to ceiling. He comes in puts it up in a day or 2 days or something, right? If you're going to do this thing with punched windows, now I've got, wall framing, got insulation, I've got drywall, I've got taping, painting, finishing, window trim, blinds, it just kind of goes on and on. So
All the little details.
we have like 6 people involved, and trying to convince me that that's cheaper than just putting up. So we have to challenge people a lot, but we think it's worth it. We just fight for good design, which internally we sort of chuckle about a lot. Maybe it's not chuckling, but it's like, I think the right thing to do.
It's funny after the fact.
Yeah. After it's all said and done.
But it's like, we just don't get it. We're just trying to do the right thing and do the right design move. And I think where most people and most owners, it's just easier to push an easy button and go, oh, well,
This is what we've done before.
yeah,
This is how we always do it.
right. And so, like I said, we usually come at it from a different angle. So that takes some convincing.
At the same time, we're not above being proven wrong. We will, fight for designs
Right.
up to a point. But if the reality is different than our dream, then we know how to kind of pivot in the dust.
Yeah. We don't have big egos. I can't afford to.
It's interesting that you embrace constraints as catalysts for creativity. You've noticed that sometimes your most challenging constraints will yield your best design results. Can you tell us about a project where a tough constraint, whether it's a budget, site limitation, or strict regulations, forced you to think outside of the box and actually improved the final outcome? And how does your team approach turning a challenge into inspiration during the design process?
Yeah, we like challenges, right? I mean, anybody can design a house out in the middle of a 5-acre cornfield, right? You just, do whatever you want to do. But if you're on what's our most challenging? Maybe like Jerry Ryan might be.
Yeah,
most challenging. Chat about that one.
There's a lake house renovation project we did up near Forbes, Indiana. That was this. I think between the main and second floor, it was less than 1,600 square feet total. When we went to visit it the first time, it was funny. I don't think it had been updated since the 70s. There was different colored shag carpet in all the bedrooms, wood paneling in the dining room. It was a vibe. So the challenge there was, how do we turn this tight lake house into something that functions a little bit more for a large modern family without really expanding at all. So I think when we started, it was a 3-bedroom, 1 bath. And by the time we were done, it was a 3-bedroom, 3.5 bath with a separated laundry room and a pretty large kitchen and living room that looked out this big multi-slide onto the lake. Because when you're at the lake, bedrooms can be tight because it's all about hanging out with your family. So the common space was sort of the most important thing in this house. So, the bathrooms we designed in there were sort of like airplane bathrooms. They're super tight and efficient. They're kind of really fun. And one of the main challenges was the client wanted a dining table that could sit up to 8 people, but also wanted a fully functional living room in less than 1,600 square feet with 3 bathrooms or 3.5 bathrooms and 3 bedrooms. So how do you make these spaces sort of pull double duty? So our sort of idea was, okay, well, we've got this big kitchen island in the middle of the space that kind of opens up into the living space. Can we hide a dining room table in this thing somehow? So I was poking around trying to figure out a solution to do this, and kind of thought about big truck bed sliders. If you've got a pickup truck, big F-150 or something, they make cargo sliders that basically take up the whole footprint of the truck bed, and they're on sliders that mount to the bed, and they can pull out basically the full depth of that truck bed and hold a lot of weight. So there's just this big overbuilt metal frame with these nice sliders on it, and they detent every 2 feet. So I found one that you could sort of customize the dimensions of, and basically I designed it so that we could fit an 8-foot table inside the kitchen island that fully tucked away and hid. There's a kind of recessed panel that flipped up and even hid the table when it was stowed away. And when it's pulled out, it doesn't need any legs to flip down or anything. The whole 8-foot table was cantilevered based on a sort of subframe in the kitchen island that bolted to the structure of the floor. So you can pull this thing out 2, 4, 6, 8 feet. And then we had 2 benches that had sort of natural places where they'd live when the table was away. But when you pulled out the table, you could bring those 6-foot, 8-foot benches over to the table and have dinner with 8, 9 people sitting at this table that, for all intents and purposes, disappears when you're not using it.
How did that idea come about with the sliders? I mean, obviously, you guys were trying to solve a problem. So.
Yeah. I mean, we sort of knew the problem. We knew how do we make a table disappear.
Yeah.
And
Aside from, coming up, does it come up through the floor? Do we tuck it back here? Yeah.
Come up with that. So the owner was like, can we just have the table come up out of the floors? I'm like, well, and then Daniel started thinking and doing some research, and I don't know if he was looking for a new pickup truck or but it was an ingenious solution. And that project, it's still only 1,600 square feet with all the bells and whistles in there. We felt like yacht designers, and really, I mean, every little nook and cranny mattered in that place. So
yeah.
And it's on Airbnb, and it's a good sort of marketing strategy for us. Like,
somebody told us about
it's actually been, somebody's to go live, try out one of our projects is fun. And then you kind of, a lot of our projects are so detailed that it's hard to convey all the things that went into it just from some pictures online. You start to pick up some of those, but I think when somebody lives or really occupies one of our projects, then you can start to feel all the different nuances to it and experience the table that comes out from the island, or the details that go into fitting 3.5 baths and 3 bedrooms into 1,600 square feet. Because I think, there's a lot of things that go into that you kind of breeze over if you're looking at it quickly. So it's been fun to kind of have something out there that then becomes, again, we don't market it. So like these, I walked through this lake house, or I stayed at this house that you guys did. It's fun to have those come back to us and hear some of the things from kind of the, voice on the street.
Well, with all the projects you guys have mentioned so far, it's obvious you don't limit yourself to a single project type. You strive for challenging design opportunities rather than sticking to specific markets. Since your portfolio spans homes, restaurants, breweries, civic and cultural projects, even a treetop outpost, as I mentioned earlier, how do you adapt your design process when jumping between such different project types? And is there a core design philosophy that ties all these diverse projects together under one banner?
Well, I just think it's our process, basically, right? Then it just becomes a matter of scale. And we've always started at kind of a small scale, right? Then it's just how far you scale up, right? Like the homeless housing project is you start with that little 500 square foot module, right? Then you just keep kind of scaling it up. So to us, it is all about design opportunity. We've done everything from, I guess, dog houses. We won some award for that dog house.
You did a dog house?
Yeah.
Okay, tell me about the dog house.
It was for the Humane Society. I think it was like, so you had to design and build a dog house when they auction them off. Yeah. So ours was pretty cool, actually.
Awesome.
It was kind of fun. But I think we won the detail award or something. TAIL.
Okay.
Emphasis intentional.
Yeah. But again, it's just kind of scaling up, right? I mean, I don't know who it was, Saarinen, right? Eliel, the old man who always said that every design, like if you're designing a chair, the chair should relate to the table table should relate to the room, that room should relate to the rooms next to it. Those rooms should relate to the rooms upstairs, they relate to the house, they relate to your neighbor's house, they relate to the neighborhood, so you're always stepping it up to the next level of that design and how it's all integrated. So we always sort of simplify everything we do, which is really hard. I mean, it's easy to come up with an idea and just try to run with it. I think it's another thing to try to develop a party or develop a concept that can then be whittled down to, sort of bare essence, which then helps everybody in the end. But it's still, again, a great space to be in because that's what we're creating. We're not just, pushing things around on the table. We're creating space, and we're always kind of thinking about that, how you engage in that space. So it's just a matter of scale to us. Just kind of keep scaling it up. So
I imagine there's got to be more than just scaling when it comes to like, here's a residential house, here's a dental office. I mean, I understand the dental office is probably bigger, but
right.
But I think fortunately, all of our work has to do with human scale, and that whether a human's in a dentist's office or their living space or a bathroom or a bedroom, we kind of all occupy roughly, give or take a little bit, the same amount of space and perceived space similarly. So when you're giving people, good natural light, sometimes you want to compress someone in their space, whether it's through an entry and then release into sort of a living space. We employ a lot of those tactics throughout sort of all of our projects. That it's there might be some compression somewhere differently in a dental office than we would in a single family home, but we're still employing a lot of the same tactics. We're just using them in a little bit different way, but it all has to do with human scale. I think we've developed tools, experiences, and things like that to understand what feels right in the human scale in certain settings, and what times you need to grow things or, again, compress things. We have a toolbox of ways of doing things that we can kind of implement in almost any type of project, but we also sit down and think critically about where those things make the most sense to do, and whether it's, out at Conner Prairie in a museum space, or whether it's a permanent supportive housing project, we just need to figure out what tool makes sense for this piece of the project.
Well, I think it's relationship-based too, back at the end, which is kind of the fun part of what we do. And Daniel's our head researcher, I think. But, when you meet a dentist, right, and you question them about their practice, like, okay, well, what are the trends for the future in dentistry? Are you still going to have a receptionist? Are you going to check out in the exam room? Are you going to schedule appointments some other way? So then that helps us develop the program, develop the concept, but we also learn a lot, right? And we like to engage with these different clients and different types of, projects that we're looking at, which for us is pretty exciting. Even the supportive housing, even Lutheran Child and Family Services, I was like, okay, everybody has sort of the group, sessions or whatever. Is that going to be viable 5 years from now? So are we going to design these group rooms that could be obsolete in a year? So we're always trying to kind of quiz our clients and push them a little bit to think about not just now, but like, how is this going to look? How's their industry going to look? How are things changing, or how would they like to see them change? Because this is the opportunity to do it, as opposed to just doing what they always do. Like, well, we need 3 group rooms. Well, do you need 3 group rooms? Right? I mean, that's the first question we ask. Like, why do you need 3 group rooms? Or are you going to need 3 group rooms 5 years from now? And then they stop and look at you and think about it. But it's that dialogue that really makes a great project, right? Because you can't have a great project without a great client. It's never happened.
Yeah. And I think, like Clete said, the important thing is the process.
Yeah.
We've done a lot of residences. I think, we could call ourselves experts in residential design, but we're not experts in our next client's way of living. Like, we need that feedback from them to tell us how they want to occupy their home. How do they live differently, or what are they trying to achieve? So I think each project, we bring our skill set, and a lot of that is how we process through projects, but we're getting feedback and information from every client that comes to us, and how do we together as a team craft the best possible project. I think a lot of times people have this idea that, as architects, we kind of go off into a corner, come up with something and present it and say, here's your project. But if we're not collaborating with our clients, then we're not going to design something successful. Because at the end of the day, we walk away from our projects and, say enjoy it, but our clients are the ones that continue to live with them. So if it's not done in collaboration with them, then we've failed.
Yeah. And it's a good process because we're not selling something right there along the journey all the way. Right. We're at the corner, coming bang, going, no, ta-da.
So those conversations that you have at the beginning don't stop. They can
Which again, back to one of your earlier questions, is like the most challenging parameters often bring the most fruitful designs from us, which we've had any array of clients that come in with, well, we want you to do something cool. This is kind of the general parameters, but they're fairly loose. And we've really got to kind of pull teeth to get more parameters out of someone, because again, you can do, in the middle of the cornfield, you don't have much context. And if you don't have any parameters for the people that are going to be occupying it, you could take that house and plop it anywhere and it works. So we really enjoy those parameters, whether it's even just a space parameter or a very unique living situation parameter. And every project is different. People think that, it's just a house. The house is the same as a house, but every single client that we take on lives just a little bit differently than the ones before or the next ones. And I think part of that is because I think we've gotten pretty good about interviewing clients and seeing when a client is very intentional about how they live and understanding their own parameters to be able to give to us, that we can then do something that isn't just off the shelf. Because again, we recognize parameters from clients, and we know that those are going to breed good projects and successful projects.
Yeah, I think there's probably a moment on the projects that we're proudest of, where at some point the clients challenged us and challenged the design and said, this isn't quite right. And I think we were in that moment happy about where the design was, and we're like, I don't know if they're right, but through that process of kind of going back through it, re-looking at it, taking the feedback and coming out on the other side, I think every time some of our favorite projects, I think, went through that process where we were challenged, came up with a new direction or a new design. And because of that process, the project's better. And, if we had just kind of gone start to finish with no input, that opportunity isn't there to be challenged and to rethink and to kind of go back and reevaluate decisions and come up with something new. So I think that feedback is critical to our process and to a successful project.
I want to make an assumption that in a studio with only 3 architects, there's no room for egos. All right, everybody has to collaborate closely. So one of your ethos is the best idea wins, and you structure project teams around each person's strengths. How do you cultivate that kind of open, ego-free collaboration on a daily basis? Can you share how you leverage each other's strengths and also work with outside collaborators when a project requires skills beyond your core team?
Yeah. I think part of our process is, again, engaging with clients, owners, and consultants in a very collaborative way, that we want everybody at the table, contractors, owners, consultants. If they can give us the time, we will have everybody sit down at the table and we will go through everybody's ideas. I think we've all got an ego that's small enough to fit through the door, so we can all sit down and work together. But we also, think those critical questions help then bring to light other people's ideas and really put ideas through the paces to understand which is the best, not just who thinks their idea is the best, but when we all sit down, we go through scenarios, we can all sit and say, well, I really like that one that I brought to the table, but I understand that this one solves the parameters that we've set out better than other ones. And then when you get down to the end of the project, nobody has to sit back and think, well, I wish I would have said something back earlier on and brought up my idea, because I think that would have been better. Because that just sort of people get worked up about, well, I want to go back and try that again. And usually you're far enough in the process that becomes really detrimental to the continuing progress of the project. So I think the collaborative way that we go about projects brings to light, everybody's comfortable with bringing out their ideas. There's been times when people aren't yet, and we kind of come up with an idea, we talk through an idea, and then we sit down and review the idea, and then it's not for another week later that, well, I kind of had this other idea I kind of wanted to try. Well, we need to talk about those. Everybody has to be comfortable enough to bring those up, so we can talk about them, we can vet those ideas, so that later on we know that we all sat down and agreed on what the best solution was.
Collaboration is the key word. Yeah, it's not just a term. I mean, I think a lot of people throw collaboration around, right? Like, oh, really collaborative, but they're still going off in the corner doing something, coming back and say, oh, well, we asked your opinion. Well, that's not really how we roll, right? I mean, the whole team is part of the process, and that way we're not selling anything, and that way the best idea does win. Whoever, and I think also in our process, we force ourselves to do really better and do, like at the very beginning, we try to do at least 3 completely different options, because almost everybody that comes to us already has an idea what they want to do. They've already thought about it for years, and usually they can do a little sketch, or they did it on Excel or something.
That's pretty impressive. It is impressive when somebody can do a floor plan in Excel.
So they're already in this sort of rigid kind of mindset, right? Like, well, I've already got it figured out. I just need you guys to make it look like something.
Are these typically engineers that do that?
Yeah, well, I'm not going to pick it.
Yeah, sometimes. Please say it.
So by doing like 3 completely different options, then I think it puts in everybody's head that like, oh, there's more than one way to solve this, right? And actually that's kind of cool. I like that part of that option, or I like this part of that option. And so that way it starts this dialogue, right, of the team and the collaboration. And it's not just, we're not just saying we're collaborative, we're asking you. And sometimes it's hard to get out of clients, right, because they think they're going to hurt our feelings or, something, right? Well, we don't want to piss off the architect, so we're just going to stay quiet. And then the wife will tell the husband, and then they'll email you at midnight. Well, my wife really hated that. We're like, well, what we should have talked about it?
That's when we should have talked about it, because then, like a text message or email, right? Were they saying that in like a collaborative way? Were they saying it in a way that they wanted to hurt your feelings? Like written stuff, it's so hard to figure out the tone of that. So like, let's just sit down and talk about it.
So we like those face-to-face things. It's a little bit more open, and if we're honest, then I feel they're honest, right? And so we're always honest in what we do and what we're putting out there, and we're like, hey, maybe you like it, maybe you don't like it, you got to tell us, right? And then we can get there. But if we all operate in a little vacuum, we'll never get there. So collaboration is the key, but it's like really truly collaboration, not just we're collaborating. Do that on our website.
Do these conversations about collaboration ever get spirited? Passionate?
Sure.
Passionate even?
Sure. There's been crying at meetings. There's been, people leaving meetings.
Usually mainly Clete.
Yeah.
They usually just get him,
They're Clete. Well, because again, like you said, especially on like single family homes, where it may have been a couple of years of someone thinking about this project before they build up the courage to get a professional involved and talk to an architect that I have this idea. I know how it's going to look. I just need you guys to make it work. And sometimes, a lot of the times we'll say, well, we're open to looking at the project and working with you on it, if you're open to seeing some new ideas too, because you've shown us these 3 or 4 iterations that have all stemmed from the same concept that you've kind of been mulling over for 3 or 4 years. Can we bring in some fresh ideas? And usually those are ones where we can tell somebody's going to get a little bit offended when you start changing these things around. So they've got a client needs to come in with some open-mindedness. I don't think we ever like really truly hurt anybody's feelings, because I think we've gotten pretty good at being objective about, well, yep, this idea that you've had, it kind of hits these points that you've told us, but these other things that you've said, maybe there's a different way to address those parameters. So that's probably the most passionate that people get, is when they've been holding on to this toddler of a design and they don't want to give it up.
Kind of suit to it.
Yeah, they've got this thing that they've been carrying with them. They've been thinking through their space as they've been using it. That's a harder one to break. And sometimes there are usually things about that then form themselves into what is ultimately the project. Because again, we're not experts in how they live, but we have tried a lot of different things and how people occupy space again. So can we try this to achieve what you've told us, but maybe in a little bit of a different way?
Got it. So Clete, part of 110's identity is your passion for mentoring emerging professionals. How do you approach mentorship with your team, and what does that look like on a day-to-day at the studio? And for Andrew and Daniel, What have you learned from working closely with an industry veteran like Clete, and how do you bring your own leadership style or fresh perspective into the mix as the firm grows?
Yeah. I'm the KG veteran, I guess, right? So, mentorship is important to me. I mean, I think just in a bigger context, I'm a little worried about the architectural profession to begin with. I think, the more and more information that's out there, the more commoditized architecture is becoming. I think, when I started, it was, people sort of embrace that idea of the architect and, his ideas and, and now it's like, well, how many drawings can you give me? Like, no, we're not producing drawings, right? It's the 5 inches between our ears that we're giving you. My 42 years of experience that I'm trying to mentor. So I've taught off and on at Ball State as an adjunct for, since I started in 99. Usually about every other year I end up teaching a design studio up there. So that's one way I try to get back. I always try to mentor people within the firm, but there's 3 of us. We're always pretty busy. It's at times hard to set aside that time, but like I remember I had great mentors back in the day, right? When deadlines weren't, like immediate, right? It was before text messaging. Yeah, maybe somebody actually would write you a letter or something. Say, but you had time to sort of think and process and, try to come up with, your own sort of design voice, I guess. I fear that there's just not enough time to do that. We're all just so pressured to, make a solution, make clients happy, hit deadlines. That mentoring is harder. But I try. It's still important to me, and I still think we want to get back to the profession. We try to get back to the profession as much as we can. We try to have an intern here all the time, and we used to have a pretty good, mark on interns. Since I taught up there, I would, find a good intern, best intern ever, who's now been here. He never left.
No,
Just never left.
like a bad penny.
Keep coming back.
But it was interesting. So we would find, the best intern and then have that intern find the best intern in the mixed class. And, so we were not really interviewing, 80 interns every year. Because we're a pretty unique group here, right? And we don't look at interns as like taking up trash and, doing a rendering for us or something, right? We actually need them to participate. And that's, kind of learned by throwing you in the deep end. But it's kind of part of our mentoring too, because then that sort of forces the mentoring, right? Because they're confused. They don't know what they're looking at. Like, what am I supposed to do? Then they turn around and ask one of us, mostly Daniel, how do you do this? Like, what does this mean? What is that? What am I looking for here? And so I think the culture of mentorship, hopefully, we're all doing that, but, and hopefully that continues, because I think everyone needs some good mentors.
Sure. You guys need me to repeat your part of the question?
No, I think I recognize it. As Clete said, I started as an intern 12 or so years ago when I was still a undergrad at Ball State, and I recognized Clete's mentoring and his unique view of projects and architecture, and I think it aligned more with how I saw architects performing in the real world, or how I thought they should. And maybe it was slightly jaded because I stayed with 110 and never went out to experience, I think, probably what some of Clete's concerns are of the architecture profession, because I recognized that I was in a place, and I was going to a place that I knew was doing important things, doing it well for the right reasons. And again, not just performing and turning around a project by this day because this is what they need, and we're not going to stop the project as a professional, as usually the only licensed professional on a project, that we should have the ability to put our foot down and say this isn't going the right direction. We need to stop, review it, think about it more critically than just what everybody else always does. I think we have the license both by the state and like as a design professional to say, we need to stop and rethink this or think about it in a different way. And I recognized that early on. And again, fortunately, I was able to come back for 2 or 3 internships. And then once I graduated undergrad, start full time and continue that idea of doing the right thing for the right reason as an architect. And then to Clete's point of having interns through the program, I always enjoyed seeing the growth that someone would have as an intern, because especially just a summer internship is hard, because usually it's 3 months before an intern is really getting the flow of an office. I think we're a little bit faster because, again, we're a little bit trial by fire, that people are, if they're coming to our internship program, they're expected to be able to jump in, get their feet wet, and get right into a project, because we all wear a lot of hats. Everybody sits in on the meetings. If an intern is working on a project, they're sitting in with the clients, and we like to have people that are new in the office present projects to owners, and all of our owners tend to be pretty good about letting somebody kind of step up to the plate, and even if they're going to strike out, at least they're going to come and swing the bat. Yeah. But I've enjoyed the mentorship from Clete, and I think it's something that we all kind of view as important. We always appreciate having interns in the office and be able to teach people. And I think we're always teaching clients already about the way we've experienced space and architecture, that we're kind of doing the same with interns too. It's just, I feel like we kind of take interns more under our wing and try to teach them how to use those skills on other projects rather than just with a client on their specific project.
So I think a key word for us, maybe you've heard it a few times, is thoughtful. I think we're very thoughtful. I think it basically come from the same moral base, which is pretty important, right, as a culture. And we all believe in each other. But I think it's the thoughtfulness, because it's easy to kind of go past that point where Andrew is just describing. We will stop and say, is this the right thing? Is this what we set out to do? Let's think about it again. So it's always this very thoughtful, intentional way to do it. And it's a little bit of leadership too, right? I mean, as opposed to taking a situation and reacting to it, we're trying to sort of lead clients, lead interns, lead ourselves through a process that we believe in. And that takes a lot of thoughtful effort and takes time. And you got to have some courage and guts to sometimes just put your foot down and say, this isn't really what we started out to do, and let's just kind of rethink all this and just go down the road just to check the box and say we did it. So, and we always say every project we take on, we want to be an award-winning project. So we look at it that way. We force ourselves to do that. And we do it a lot in sort of a mentorship way, and that we hope that maybe that helps our profession as well. So in 2010, we set out to win a design award every year. Not necessarily for us, and we love design awards, and we do love design awards, but again, our egos aren't that huge, but we're trying to also get the rest of the architectural community to, maybe if they see us marching across the stage every time, that maybe they could look at their work and say, well, why are they winning awards and why aren't we? And maybe that will force them a little bit to do better design, because I think to us, that's sort of the goal, is to rise everybody up. It goes back to our very first thing, right? Is we're not looking at everybody's weaknesses. We're trying to bolster and help everybody. So the only way we can up the design game in this community is to do it ourselves. And so we hold ourselves pretty seriously accountable. And we will sit here after a couple of designs, let's say, is this design worthy? Will this a design award? And if we all say, no, then that means we have more work to do. And then we're all willing to jump in and do that, because that's what we feel, that's what kind of operates us, and that's how we come to work every day. It's because that's what inspires us. So we push each other pretty hard, but the results are usually pretty good.
Have you won an award every year?
We've won 34 since 2000.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So more than one. Yeah.
So on average, at least.
Yeah. Yeah, we usually win multiples, actually, but it's intentional.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's a goal. And if a goal is in the back of your mind, somehow it works. I don't know how that works exactly.
Yeah, and I think the goal isn't the award. The goal is good design.
Correct.
I think that it's sort of an easy thing to say, let's win a design award every year, but we don't. The trophies are cool, but the purpose behind that is to hold ourselves to a higher standard of design, and it's sort of a metric to sort of shoot for.
You try to raise the bar every year.
Yeah. And again, that's a hard sell to clients a lot of times too, right? Because they're like, well, I don't care. Like, well, we do.
Hey, we're trying to win an award here.
No, but not again.
Sure.
It's just up the design game.
Yeah, absolutely.
We just think it's could be better. I was going to say something. I think it could be better.
Daniel, design build isn't just a buzzword for you. You did a thesis at Auburn's Rural Studio and even designed things like mobile music playgrounds and an elephant barn for nonprofits early on. It's pretty hands-on, community-oriented start to an architecture career. How have those experiences, from design build projects to organizing creative events like Pichakucha?
People say it a lot of different ways. I say Pechakucha.
Yeah. How have those shaped the way you approach projects at 110 Studio, or the kinds of projects you're passionate about tackling now?
Yeah, Rural Studio is an amazing experience. For a tiny bit of background, it's one of the thesis options at Auburn. You go out your 5th year of school, since it's a 5-year program, and organize yourselves into teams. Up to 12 students can go out a semester for a thesis, and you organize yourselves into 3 teams of 4. The selection process is a fun experience where it's a late night, lots of discussions, but basically at the end of that, you come out into these teams, and you spend your last year, your 5th year, designing a project in a really small town in rural West Alabama. At the end of that year, around graduation, you have a final review. You've done all this work the whole year. You're out there basically just doing this full time. And if your team has done enough work, shown sort of enough proof behind the concept of the project, and the studio has support, you get approval to build the project. So in the design process, we have that at the back of our mind the whole time. Not only are we designing a project that hopefully will get built, but also the 4 of us are going to be the ones that build it. So everything has to be fully fleshed out. I think there's sort of a level of care in knowing that the lines you draw on paper, you're then going to be responsible for putting into the real world every step of the way. So you have to be fully knowledgeable about every aspect of a project in a way that I think is pretty rare for architecture school. To have a project that real was, I think, an extraordinary experience. To know that what we were drawing was going to be built. We also had to sort of be responsible for fundraising for the project. There's a certain budget you get for the project, but then you can stretch that budget as far as you can with material donations and stuff like that. So going out and talking to manufacturers, talking to fabricators, getting them to buy in on the project, to buy in on the studio, to really like sell your design, was a part of that experience. So from that, I think you get this really ingrained sense of responsibility in design, and sort of knowing how buildings go together, knowing the process of construction, knowing sort of the things that are hard along the way, and ways that you can sort of design solutions to construction issues. So that was sort of where I came from in school. After that, I went to Nashville. I was working part-time at the Nashville Civic Design Center, which is a nonprofit in Nashville that focuses on sort of design in the city and supporting the city, supporting schools, sort of a nonprofit that is trying to help bring better design to the city. And then part-time at an elephant sanctuary, where I was their capital projects manager and sort of in-house architect. And those two experiences were very different. The elephant sanctuary was, again, in rural Tennessee, like an hour and a half outside of Nashville. And I would live on site in a cabin 2 to 3 days a week, and then travel back to Nashville and do the Civic Design Center stuff on Mondays and Fridays. So kind of coming into architecture professionally in a really unique way, I think kind of broadened my horizon, my view on sort of what was potential, what careers were out there. We moved to Indy, my wife and I, after that first year, so it kind of changed career paths, but I hold those experiences pretty dear, and sort of knowing that there's different ways to approach things. There's some really unique opportunities out there. And, from Rural Studio, knowing how buildings go together is really important as an architect. And having that hands-on experience was really important.
Very cool.
Which we kind of bring into all of our projects is we have, whether it's the way it gets done or not, we have an idea of how these materials will come together. And, we distill a lot of our projects into how two things will come together, whether it's two living situations where it's more public, more private. How do those two pieces come together? Or how does this brick meet this siding? Or how does this glass meet this frame? Like we have an idea of how these things are coming together, and implementing it in one way or another. And those conversations with the contractor, Clete's had a lot of experience as an architect. Daniel has design build things. I've put things together and built things a little bit too, but we all have some confidence in how we think these things should go together, that we can sit down with a contractor and talk through these things and be, again, the best idea wins. That it's not always the idea that's always been done, but the best idea. So in some instances, we're happy to be wrong on ways of doing things, but also as long as everybody's willing to have a conversation about it and say, well, maybe we should do it a little bit differently this way. What if we try adding it to this process? So having confidence to be able to propose something that isn't the norm is something that I think architects should probably do more often, is try to challenge the status quo a little bit. And I think we do a pretty good job of that, because we look at what's the best solution for the problem, not what's the solution that everybody else has done for everything else. How can we kind of mold it to make it work for this? It's what is the best solution for this problem.
Well, being an architect is a constant learning experience. I mean, I think there's something we learn from every project we do. There's multiple things we learn from every project we do. I think Clete's a much better architect than I am, because he's been at it for way longer than I have. Hopefully I can get to where he is now by that time, but I think we're always learning and growing, and the way we do things should follow that as well. Construction hopefully evolves as technologies evolve, so we should be kind of pushing the boundaries on what are the best ways to do things, what are the newest technologies, what are the sort of best practices for building science and for human-centric or biophilic design. How can we sort of take this knowledge from everywhere? I think as architects, we have to know a decent amount about so many different things, but also know to have a conversation with somebody that's a true expert in that field, and how do we sort of lean on them to make what we're trying to do better.
But that's architecture. And that's how all these things come together, the details. Otherwise, it's just building. Anyone can build. We can get anybody off the street to build something, right? But it's that art. It's the craft of those details, and that's how we design, right? That's how you can design a building. If you don't know how those components are going together, then you're kind of lost. You're never going to really have a great design, because you're just relying on somebody else to implement an idea that probably is not going to come off very well unless you're controlling it.
Andrew, you've mentioned that growing up in rural Indiana and spending time in nature inspires you to pursue distilled and pure design solutions. How does that personal background manifest in your work at 110 Studio? And can you give an example of a project where your inclination towards simplicity or your inspiration from nature had a real influence on the design outcome?
Yes.
Nothing to do with groundhog.
No.
Talk about that.
Here. Yeah, so growing up in rural Indiana, I think I had a pretty good appreciation for, I guess, the way nature finds its solution, and whether that's through plant life, animal life, weather, water cutting through rock. I think nature finds its most efficient path. And I think it distills a lot of the kind of white noise of what's going on to create the best solution between kind of point A and point B, but not doing but it doesn't ignore kind of the beauty that kind of comes from that. So I think there's probably a lot of examples of the way plant life and animal life can solve problems, but doesn't ignore something that's truly visually beautiful, whether it's birds attracting mates or whether it's, trees changing colors. Like, they don't always do it for our visual beauty, but it's sort of a byproduct. And I think in architecture, distilling a lot of what can be kind of monotonous programming data and scope data and distilling that into something that's actually beautiful is a big challenge that we have, because I think there's plenty of examples of projects that just take a program or a scope of an Excel document and turn it into a floor plan and then, make it 3 stories tall and then it's just done. I think what our challenge is how do you create a building and a form that is something beautiful and it solves all those programmatic needs just the way another one does, but do it in a way that also doesn't break the project's budget, but can do something that's visually enriching and beautiful. I think a recent example of one of our projects that was really distilled into something simple as our experience space out at Conner Prairie. It's in the middle of the woods. If you're not familiar with Conner Prairie, it's got a lot of historic homes, a lot of historic buildings out there. It's in a setting that's on the sort of the side of a hill. But as we were coming up with some of our formations and how the building is going to capture a lot of the program space, we kept distilling it into something that ended up becoming a very simple volume to house all this program space. And it made sense to us because it's in the middle of the woods. Something with a lot of different roof lines or a lot of different form lines in the building is just going to cause problems in the middle of the woods, whether it's collecting leaves or branches or animals getting into it. So we did something that was scaled very simply in a metal box rib siding that could stand up to the elements. It was something that wasn't going to attract a lot of animals. It wasn't going to have to be replaced very often, and a very simple roof shape that basically shed all the water, all the leaves, all the branches that got onto it, so that nobody had to get up and to the roof in the middle of a rainstorm to clear off branches and things like that. So we try to do things. I think, again, growing up in rural Indiana, I grew up seeing a lot of farm architecture, and I think there's a sense of doing things in a simple way that, like, maybe a farmer out in the country would solve a problem. There's a lot of really great things about that. But I think there's the need to do something artistic and beautiful as well, that I think architecture should bring to people. So it's a little bit of both. Is how do you do it from the mindset of nature and farmers and simplicity, but also doing it in a way that's very real for a project and its budget and other parameters like we've talked about that are also very real things to consider.
It always feels natural in the air.
As architects rooted in Indianapolis, you're not just building buildings, but also engaging with the community, from neighborhood organizations to creative events like Pecha Kucha or Pecha Kucha. How do those community involvements influence your perspective on architecture in the city? And looking ahead, what mark or legacy do you hope 110 Studio will leave on Indianapolis's built environment in the next decade?
I think you should start with the Pecha Kucha.
I want to hear from all of you guys on this one. It's the last question, so.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, so unfortunately, Pecha Kucha in Indy sort of died off during COVID, and sort of we didn't sort of reorganize after that. But it was a really exciting few months where it was me and two other designers in the city from different firms that got together and said, hey, let's do this thing. And it was a really sort of fostering environment where we would get, 8 to 10 speakers at Pechacucha evening, and they would just tell stories or talk about design or something. And I think there's that sense of community and a really supportive community that was really invigorating about that. And I don't know, maybe one day we'll bring it back. Maybe somebody else will. We were the second holders of the Pechacucha torch in Indianapolis. It's kind of simmered down again, but maybe somebody will pick it back up. But I think we have that sort of collaborative, supportive environment in the studio. How do we make this studio sort of be that outside of just these four walls? I think that's something that I'd like to see. How do we grow that sort of fostering, supportive, engaging community that we have between the three of us to more than just the three of us?
Yeah, we're pretty modest most of the time. So yeah, we're not screaming by the rooftops usually, but I think most people in the community, most people in the state probably know us, right? So I mean, I think we have that going for us. We're not, we should probably be involved in some more community things maybe, but we're pretty busy too. So we're trying to find that kind of balance, right? It's almost like a work-life balance. Like how do you get to that community and how do you make that work? But we try, we're involved with AIA, all of us obviously. So down the committees in one form or another. Thanks for being a sponsor. Shameless plug. Yeah, but as far as the legacy, I guess, we just touched on it earlier. I think we're just trying to up the design game. I think we've gained a lot of traction probably in the last 4 or 5 years with awards, and universities are asking us to sit in on critiques and things like that. So I think we're involved in that kind of community. We're never going to be a pay-to-play kind of a firm, right? We're not that big that we're going to go to mayor's dinners and think we're going to get work out of that. I mean, I think
if they invite us, we'll go.
Yeah, we'll go.
Mayor Joe, I know you're listening to this.
We'll go.
Yeah, but
I don't know how much we can donate. But.
Yeah, but we'll give it a shot. But yeah, so I mean, we've always just relied on sort of our work, right? Bringing other good work. So I don't know if that's our legacy or not, but again, we're just trying to do the best design effort we can up in game and for everybody. So hopefully that's a legacy. But I think most people look at us that way, and that those guys are doing good design or
I think that's a good answer.
Winning awards, doing things. But
I think within the context of currently mostly central Indiana, we've had a couple of projects kind of branch out here regionally. But as we kind of expand our area of influence to more Midwest area, but also just in the Indianapolis area, it's fun to see even brand new clients or prospective clients or people that we just kind of engage with off the street that we kind of start talking about architecture, talk about some of our projects, for them to bring up projects of ours, or even if they haven't seen it on our website yet, or we haven't talked about it yet, to bring us one of our other projects as a precedent to say, there's some things about this that I really like. And we can say, well, oh yeah, that was one of our projects that,
them not knowing it.
That's not understanding that was one of ours before they bring it to us. I think that's part of our identity is there's something sort of not quite tangible about what makes our projects, that we don't have a very specific design style. We don't have a specific move that we make. There are some things that we like to do that we understand help people and our scale of space. But to have people just intrinsically understand that this is a 110 studio project is kind of fun to get. That I think as we continue to build our project portfolio and to have more and more of those, that maybe it becomes one of those things that most people have engaged with a 110 studio project in some form of or another in Indianapolis. And maybe if they don't come to us and say, oh, congratulations, Clete and Daniel and Andrew, you guys, we saw this project, but to engage with one of our projects and maybe be a little bit better off for it is something I think could be a legacy that far outlasts any one of us, that I think would be something that, something that stands the test of time, that can be better for Indianapolis and for people in the area.
All right, I think that's a wrap. That was a good conversation, and I hope whoever listens gets just as much out of it as I did.
Yeah, thanks for coming to chat.
Thanks, guys.